The good old Quest 2 versus the new Quest 3 headset. Should you buy it, and is it worth the upgrade? Let's dive right in. It's been nearly 3 years since we first got our hands on the Oculus Quest 2, and with it becoming the world's best-selling VR headsets of all time. And now, the Quest 3 is right around the corner. And while it is $200 more, it does promise some significant changes. So let's start this comparison with the very first thing that you will notice being the new design and comfort. Now there is no doubt that both the Quest 2 and 3 share the same DNA, with both having the same color, a cloth head strap, and a rails with built-in speakers. But while they may seem very similar on the surface, the first big change is their all-new pancake lenses. And this is the same feature that you might remember from the Quest Pro. So with it, it means it doesn't need as much space to fit their bulky old lenses anymore, making the overall headset a total of 40% smaller. But while the weight is practically exactly the same, it does allow for increased comfort so that it doesn't feel like you have a rock attached to your face. Secondly, these new lenses will also allow for a slightly bigger field of view, but probably even more important is that they also create more clarity. Plus, an old, much requested feature is also coming back to the Quest 3. This is none other than the IPD adjustment wheel, where in the Quest 2 you only have 3 different settings which you have to set up for the distance between your eyes. And now with the adjustment wheel coming back, you'll be able to fine-tune the spacing much more specific than you were before. But the biggest change you have probably noticed is the front of the Quest 3, since it looks a lot different, now prominently displaying the cameras in a way that is much more obvious to everyone around you. And including inside of it, you'll find a whopping 6 cameras instead of the 4 on the Quest 2, even with 2 located at the underside of your headset, and with the middle one containing a new IR projector as well as a depth sensor, which are crucial for mixed reality. But there is also a small detail that a lot of people forget, and that is the outside placement of the headphone jack and USB port. While they are still both available on the Quest 3, they are now in complete different locations, and that means that some of your Quest 2 accessories might not be compatible with this new VR headset. So make sure to check that beforehand so you don't get disappointed once it arrives. But that gets us to its biggest selling points, that being the graphics, performance, and the battery life. Now Meta truly went all in with its brand new Snapdragon chipset, and while we don't know the official name yet, it is likely to be called the Snapdragon XR2 Generation 2. And while that might not sound like much, the benchmarks show that it has 3 times more performance power than that of the Quest 2. So we can get much better looking VR games than we could ever imagine on this mobile chipset. But with great power comes the big responsibility called battery life, with Meta confirming that even with this big upgrade, the battery life for the Quest 3 will be practically the same as that of its predecessor, keeping in mind that it is still not a lot, so an extra battery pack is still highly recommended. Secondly, the display will also rock at a higher resolution, and while the raw numbers are still unknown, we do not expect to see such a high resolution jump as the Apple Vision Pro, but it is still an important way to deliver further clarity than just putting in some new lenses. But sadly, a big downside is that it will still be using an LCD panel. While I personally think that at this point, OLED screens should be the absolute golden standard for any VR headset this year. But besides that gets us to the brand new controllers and hand tracking. These new additions are the most radical change that we have seen in the main Quest line, because they look very similar to that of the Pro versions, which these one being called the Touch Plus. And the design is dropping the LED ring that surrounds the normal controllers and instead puts the LEDs all over the body itself. But besides the looks, it is also said to have much more accurate tracking, and with it, also some amazing quality haptic feedback. So instead of a basic rumble, you will actually start to have a more realistic feeling inside virtual reality. And the same can be said for the non-controller hand tracking, because thanks to the new cameras and depth sensor, it will much more accurately track the movements that you are making with your hands. But that probably brings us directly to the biggest new feature of the Quest 3, and that is the new mixed reality. This is the golden goose that Meta is betting all its money on, since mixed reality will be capable of showing you the real world view through its built-in cameras. But the difference is that now it will be in full color and more than 10 times its previous resolution. And that is one of the most insane hardware upgrades we have got for a long time. And given its big competition like Apple, we're also going all in on mixed reality. I only think it will become more and more important for Meta as time progresses. And this also directly brings a concern from many users features that some of the upcoming games might be Quest 3 exclusives, since the original Quest 2 is not capable of taking advantage of these kind of features. But lastly, we also have to talk about the price, because although the Quest 3 almost sounds too good to be true, it also comes in at a higher price point of $499. And when the argument can definitely be made that it is worth the new technology that they put into it, it is still a significant bump in price compared to the Quest 2. So that leaves the question, should you buy or upgrade to the Quest 3, and is it really worth it? To summarize it up, when it comes to technology, there is absolutely no getting around of it. The Meta Quest 3 is better in every single way imaginable, and this big gap will only continue to widen as we see more mixed reality experiences and features added to it over time, with the only big downside being the much higher price point. And this might become an increasingly big obstacle if you already own a Quest 2. But I truly think that anyone who doesn't own a VR headset yet and is thinking of getting the Quest 3, that they will be making an absolute great choice. And for those who already own a Quest 2 and want to upgrade, you might want to try to get a good sale before it's too late, because the Quest 3 is definitely worth your while. But that's not all. We also had some big other VR news, so click on the video you see on screen right now to make sure you don't miss out.